She sat where the light barely moved. The room held its breath. Nothing rang. Nothing arrived. Still, she stayed. She sat in the same chair she always chose. Not because it was comfortable, because it faced the window. The chair was old, its fabric thinned where a body had rested too many times. It did not offer support. It simply existed. She lowered herself into it with care, as if any sudden movement might disturb something fragile in the air. The window was half open, not enough to let wind in, just enough to let the world stay outside. Her hands rested in her lap. They did not fidget. They did not search for anything. They stayed still, palms down, as if waiting had become a posture. Nearby, a phone lay on a flat surface. It was placed neatly, aligned with the edge, not close enough to reach without leaning, not far enough to forget. It stayed there, dark and quiet, like everything else. She did not look at it. She watched the light instead. How it shifted slowly across the floor. How it paused on the leg of the chair. How it never quite reached her feet. Some people believed waiting required effort. She had learned otherwise. Waiting, real waiting, asked for less. Fewer movements, fewer thoughts, less sound. Her breathing softened. Not slower, just quieter. There were things she could have done. Small tasks, meaningless tasks. But she had already moved past that part. Doing something only made the absence louder. So she stayed. The room carried familiar signs of her presence. A folded fabric nearby, a mark on the wall she never fixed. These things did not explain her. They only confirmed she had been there long enough to leave traces. She tilted her head slightly, not to listen. Listening implied expectation. This was different. This was staying open without reaching. The chair held her weight. The window held the light. The phone remained where it was. No one noticed the stillness gathering around her. No one knew how carefully she had arranged the quiet. And so she sat, not moving, not leaving, allowing the silence to stay exactly as it was. Tom did not move forward. It widened. The light shifted again, thinner now, stretching along the floor before fading into a dull gray. She noticed it without following it, watching it become passive, almost accidental. Her back pressed into the chair, not firmly, just enough to feel where she ended and where the rest of the room began. The chair did not respond. It never did. It accepted weight without acknowledgement. The phone remained untouched. At times, a faint sound drifted in from beyond the window. Not voices. Not words. Just the suggestion that something else was happening somewhere else. The sound did not enter the room fully. It hovered, then disappeared. She adjusted her breathing to match the quiet. Not to control it. To blend into it. Some people thought silence was empty. She had learned it was crowded. It carried memories without showing them. It pressed gently, reminding without naming. Her gaze softened. The edges of the room blurred slightly, as if the space itself was growing tired of being seen. She did not resist that feeling. Resistance required energy. Stillness did not. The phone stayed dark. She had placed it there earlier with intention. Straightened it. Aligned it. That small act had felt important then. Now, it was simply part of the arrangement. A shape among other shapes. Minutes passed. Or maybe longer. She did not measure. There was a moment when her hand lifted a fraction from her lap. Not reaching. Not deciding. Just responding to something internal. Something almost forgotten. The hand paused. Then settled back. No sound followed. The room continued to hold its shape. The chair held her. The air held the quiet. Nothing asked her to change. She leaned slightly toward the window, not to see more, but to feel the difference in temperature. Cooler there. Honest. Unconcerned. The phone remained exactly where it was. No one knew how much patience this required. Not the active kind. The kind that asked her to stay present without expectation. To remain available without calling out. She stayed with that feeling, letting the silence deepen, letting it become familiar. Something beneath the quiet began to surface. Not suddenly. Not fully. It arrived the way a feeling does when it has been there for a long time. Unnoticed because it never demanded attention. Her shoulders lowered a little. The effort she had been holding eased without permission. The chair did not change, but her body did. It adjusted as if it no longer needed to stay ready. The phone remained dark. She became aware of how often her eyes returned to it without turning her head. A habit formed quietly over time. A reflex that asked nothing and expected nothing. Just a check. Just a presence. The room felt larger now. Or perhaps she felt smaller within it. The distance between her and everything else grew soft, undefined. She no longer measured how far the window was, or how close the phone might be if she leaned. A memory brushed past without detail. No faces, no words, only the sensation of sound once filling this space. The way it used to interrupt, the way it used to arrive without effort. Her fingers pressed lightly into her lap. The pressure grounded her, kept her from drifting too far into that thought. The phone stayed where it was. She noticed how easily she had learned this stillness, how naturally her body understood when to remain unmoving. It was not discipline. It was familiarity. There had been moments before when the silence felt temporary, fragile, as if it might break on its own. This felt different. It felt settled, as if it had decided to stay. She did not resist that realization. The light near the window dimmed further, leaving only a soft outline of the room. Edges softened. Details lost their importance. Her breathing stayed steady. The phone did not light up. It did not shift. It did not need to. What surfaced then was not disappointment. Not exactly. It was recognition, a quiet understanding that some absences do not announce themselves. They simply remain. She stayed with that awareness. Let rest. Let exist without needing to be named. The silence held. The room did not change. She did. It happened without a clear moment. No signal. No internal shift she could point to. Just a gentle loosening, as if something had finally been set down after being carried too long. Her hands rested differently now, still in her lap, but lighter. The tension that once held them in place had thinned. They no longer waited for instruction. The phone remained where it was. Dark. Aligned. Unmoved. She looked at it then. Fully. Not with hope. Not with disappointment. Simply with acknowledgement. It existed. That was enough. The chair creaked softly as she leaned back, surrendering her weight instead of managing it. The sound passed without meaning. The room did not respond. Outside the window, the last of the light slipped away. The glass reflected a faint outline of her shape, blurred and incomplete. She did not search for herself in it. Reflections had lost their urgency. Her breathing slowed on its own, not intentionally, just naturally, as if her body had been waiting for permission that never needed to be given. The absence no longer pressed. It settled, became part of the space instead of something missing from it. She did not reach for the phone. She did not turn away from it either. Both choices felt unnecessary now. What remained was a quiet understanding that some things do not return once they have passed through. They leave behind a shape, a habit, a space that does not need to be filled to be complete. She stayed seated for a while longer, not because she had to, because leaving no longer felt urgent. When she finally shifted forward, it was slow, unforced. The chair released her without resistance. The phone stayed behind. And as she stepped away from the room, nothing followed her. Not expectation. Not regret. Just the calm knowledge that she had stayed long enough to know when to let go. There are things no one says out loud. Not because there is nothing to say, but because saying it might change everything. If this story feels familiar, perhaps you understand it better than most.